Admiral William McRaven is here. He served as a Navy SEAL for almost 4 decades. As a 4-star admiral, his final assignment was as commander of all U.S. Special Operations. He is now Chancellor of the University of Texas System. His new book is called Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World. I'm pleased to have Admiral McRaven back at this table. Welcome.
Good to be back, Charlie. Thanks.
This is such a good story. I just want you to repeat it and bear with me. So you're going to write a commencement speech.
Right.
All of us have done it. And we have 2 things we want to do. Firstly, we want to say something that comes from our heart. And secondly, we do not want to say what everybody else says.
Right.
Take it from there.
Well, actually, I had been writing the speech for a couple of weeks prior to the day I was scheduled to give it, which was May 17th. And the week before, it was about Wednesday the week before, I couldn't make the speech work. You know, I had a theme, and it was all kind of coming together, and then it just stopped. I couldn't finish the theme, and had a little bit of writer's block. And I remember turning to my wife, and I said, I can't finish this thing. And she said, why don't you write about something you know? Yeah. And I said, well, the only thing I know is being a Navy SEAL for the last 35 years at that point in time. And she said, well, write about that. I said, the problem is, I'm about to step onto a university campus in uniform. Right. I don't know whether or not the students want to hear about what it took to be a Navy SEAL and the lessons I learned. But she kept saying, write about something you know. So I started actually Thursday and then kind of wrote the speech, and frankly was writing it all the way until an hour before I gave it. Really? So, but it seemed to have come together.
And you started with these 10 was it 10 things?
10 lessons.
10
right.
lessons. Were there 20, which you boiled down to 10?
No, I kind of had in mind.
Which you cheated up to 10?
No, I actually had in mind, I wanted to frame it to about 20 minutes because I knew that was the expectation on the commencement speech. And but I had 10 lessons, clear lessons in mind. And I probably could have gone 11 or 12, but the 10 seemed to fit.
And did you show it to her or before you went?
No, I never show anybody my speeches before I give them. It's a little bit of a superstition of mine. I don't let anybody read it. I don't let anybody hear it. I wait until I deliver it before anybody gets a chance to hear the remarks.
And how many people have since read that speech? It went viral.
Millions.
25 million, I read
That's my understanding. It was about 25
million people.
Right.
What was it, you think?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is the lessons are simple. And as I said at the beginning of the speech, it really doesn't make a difference whether you spend a day in uniform. It doesn't matter about your color, your background, your ethnicity, your orientation. I think these are basic lessons. There are things like, don't quit. Be your best in your darkest moment. Don't back down from the bullies. I mean, these are lessons that all of us can use in life. And of course, I put them in the context of going through SEAL training. But in fact, it really didn't matter whether you were ever going to be a SEAL. These were lessons, I think, for life.
You start with making your own bed.
Right.
Why is that important to start?
Well, when I was young, my mother was a Texas school teacher. My father was an Air Force officer. But interestingly enough, it was my mother who really kind of made sure every morning I got up and made my bed. And I think a lot of parents tell their kids to make their bed. I'm not really sure I understood the importance of it. But when we got to SEAL training, it was required every morning. We would have to have a uniform inspection and a bed inspection. And I'm not sure I understood at the time why that was important. I'd come to SEAL training to learn to be a battle-hardened SEAL. And the first thing we were doing every morning was having our bed inspected. And the lesson, though, became very clear as I went through SEAL training and, frankly, as I went through the Navy was, it's about, one, doing the first task of the day and doing it right. And if you can do the first task of the day and get that done, then that will encourage you to do another task and another and another. But the other piece of this was the SEAL instructors wanted to make sure that you did it exactly right. Yeah. There were standards. You had to have the hospital corners had to be 45 degrees. The pillow at the front of the bed had to be exactly right. The extra blanket had to be folded exactly right. And their point was, if you can't do the little things right, if you can't make your bed right, how are you ever going to run a SEAL mission correctly? So it was about doing something that was good to do in the morning, that started your day off right, and then also making sure that you did the little things right.
And you said if you can make change, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. Right. The second one was you can't go it alone.
Right. Well, this, again, in SEAL training, you learn very quickly that I don't care whether you are the strongest guy, the best runner. At the end of the day, we are called the SEAL teams for a reason, because there's a recognition that if you're going to be successful, you have to work as a team. And from day one in SEAL training, you get a little rubber boat, a raft. We call it an inflatable boat small, an IBS. Takes 7 men to carry it. There are generally 6 enlisted guys, 2 in the front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back, and then the officer is the coxswain at the very back, the helmsman, if you will, of this little rubber raft. But you take it with you everywhere you go. You run to chow with it. You run over the dunes with it when you're doing your soft sand runs. And, of course, you paddle out in the ocean with it. And the point that they make is if everybody doesn't pull together, if everybody doesn't help get that boat where it needs to go, then I don't care how good you are, you're not going to get there. So the importance of having people to help you paddle was reinforced every single day. And, of course, it was about life. And the fact of the matter is, I don't care how tough you are, most people can't make it through life on their own, and it's good to have friends and people that love you.
Okay, start with a bed, make your bed. Secondly, you can't go it alone. You need someone to help you paddle. The third is only the size of your heart.
Right.
Matters.
Well, again, the interesting thing about SEAL training is, when you start off, there's invariably somebody they pick to be the most likely to succeed, the guy that's going to be the honor man. And he invariably
Who
is.
picks them?
Well, the team does, right. The class does. And invariably, the class is new, and they find the biggest, toughest guy that looks the most like a SEAL, and he invariably is picked to be the honor man, and almost invariably he's the first person that falls out. And you find the little guy that you never expected ends up being the best guy there. And we had in our training, we divided into boat crews, and the boat crews for these little rubber rafts we carried were based on size. So all the big guys were in one boat crew, and then all the little guys in another boat crew. And we called them the Munchkin crew because they were small and based on the old Wizard of Oz Munchkins. Yeah. But these fellas, and in this particular boat crew, it was an unusual mixture of folks. We had an Indian American, we had a Greek American, we had a French American. They were all about 5'5", and they turned out to be some of the best swimmers, the best runners, the best guys in the obstacle course. Mm-hmm. And you realize very quickly it really is about the size of your heart, not the size of your flippers, as we said.
Tommy Morris.
Absolutely. So Tommy Norris was, the first time I met him, I was actually a senior in college, and I went out to visit basic SEAL training. And as I was waiting around to meet a lieutenant who was going to talk to me about basic SEAL training, out of the corner of my eye, I saw what I thought was a kind of a young teenage guy, because I could see him from a distance, and he was smaller than I was and thin, medium build and thin. And I kept watching him out of the corner of my eye, and he was looking at these pictures that we have hanging in the SEAL training compound. And they were pictures of guys in Vietnam. And I remember I kept thinking to myself, does this guy really think he would be able to make it through SEAL training? Again, small stature, wiry, thin almost. And I thought, wow, this guy is just, he's fooling himself if he thinks he's ever going to make it through SEAL training. Well, at some point in time, I get invited into the lieutenant's office, and I'm talking to this lieutenant named Doug Huth, who does look like the poster child for a SEAL. And Doug looks past the doorway, and he says, hey, Bill, let me introduce you to somebody. And he yells out in the hall, and he says, hey, Tommy, come in here for a minute. Tommy Norris walks in, and, of course, Tommy Norris was one of the last SEAL Medal of Honor recipients from Vietnam. He was, by far and away, the toughest SEAL in the history of the SEALs up to that point in time. And so, again, it was a lesson for me to realize that you got to be careful about appearances. Yeah. Tommy Norris went on to...
the heart that matters.
It was the heart that matters. He went on to be on the FBI's hostage rescue team, just an incredibly tough guy. But not the biggest guy in the boat.
You know what he did to receive the Medal of Honor?
I do. If you recall, there was an old movie called Bat 21. The real story of Bat 21 was an Air Force lieutenant colonel. A plane had gotten shot down over Vietnam. The lieutenant colonel had parachuted out. And then Lieutenant Norris, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Norris, spent several days going behind enemy lines trying to find him. Eventually managed to pick him up, had to kind of fight his way back to friendly lines. But this day after day of trying to find this downed lieutenant colonel, eventually finding him, eventually kind of fighting his way back, rescued the lieutenant colonel, and for that he received the Medal of Honor.
The next one is life's not fun. Life's not fair.
Right.
Drive on.
Yeah, this is really about what we refer to as a sugar cookie in the SEAL training. And the sugar cookie is when an instructor just arbitrarily, and this is an important point, an instructor arbitrarily says, you know, McRaven, I don't like your looks, hit the surf. So you go hit the surf, you roll around in the sand, and you're covered from head to toe in sand, and you're wet and you're sandy, and you spend the rest of the day kind of wet and sandy with sand between your armpits and your legs. But it is the arbitrariness of it that always frustrated people, because sometimes guys looked perfect in their uniform, and their brass was perfectly polished, and their shoes were perfectly polished, and they expected that they would get rewarded for this great effort. And then every once in a while, an instructor would say, hit the surf and become a sugar cookie.
Life's not fair.
Life wasn't fair. And that was the point of the lesson was, look, sometimes I don't care how hard you try, how good you might be, life is just not fair, and you just have to get over it.
Let me point to this number. In your class, only 33 graduated,
right,
and there were 150 students who started with you.
Right.
What is the difference? I take these 10 rules,
right,
if you want to change the world. What is the difference between those that ring the bell, which is what you want to do when you want to opt out, and those to pass the finish line? What's the difference?
I had a young man who was graduating from the University of Texas last year. He was a decathlete, and he was getting ready to go to SEAL training, and so nationally ranked decathlete. And he wanted to come talk to me about kind of the secrets of making it through SEAL training. So I had him over for lunch, and he sits down across from me, an incredibly sharp young man. And he says, well, Admiral, you know, obviously I'd kind of like to know, you know, what's the secret of making it through SEAL training? Do I need to spend some more time running? I said, no, you look like you're in pretty good shape. And he said, well, how about swimming? I said, no, you look like you're a decathlete. You're going to be able to do this. I said, and he kind of went through the litany of things that people think about. What does it take to make it through SEAL training? And I said, it's easy to make it through SEAL training. You just don't quit. And he kind of took a deep breath and he said, no, I understand that, but should I strengthen my upper body? And I said, let me be clear. It's easy. You just don't quit. There will come times in training when you will be exhausted, when you will begin to doubt yourself, when the instructors will be applying a pressure on you. And you just have to tell yourself, I'm not going to quit. And so the difference between those that make it through and those that don't is just that. And that's why it doesn't make any difference how fast you are, how strong you are. It really does matter about your determination not to quit. And so, you know, when you look at life, at some point in time, life deals all of us a difficult hand.
What's the biggest surprise in your not new now, job as Chancellor of the University of Texas? You
know, the transition from the military to running the University of Texas system, I think, actually went pretty smoothly. I'm used to running large organizations, and you realize in running a large organization like that it's all about the people. Right. You have to respect the people. And of course, I've got a very diverse population. It's 228,000 students. It's about 100,000 employees spread across 14 different institutions. And it's fabulous and it's fascinating. One day you're talking to a Nobel laureate, the next day you're talking to a Heisman Trophy winner, and everything in between. I'll tell you what has pleasantly surprised me is the number of people that want to give to the university, to give to causes. You know, I have MD Anderson Cancer Clinic, and there are folks from all walks of life that want to contribute to try to help cure cancer. There are folks that want to improve the quality of life for young kids in South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, and they donate not only their money, but their time and their resources and their passion to helping these young men and women, because many of them see in these young men and women themselves. We have a lot of first-in families in Texas. We have a large Hispanic population. And so when you can see these young men and women who are the first in their family to go to college, and then the first in their family to go to medical school, and you realize that they have just changed the entire trajectory of their family's lineage forever. Because statistics show that if you go to college, chances are your kids will go and their kids will go. So this is the great appeal of this particular job is, having an opportunity really to watch the young men and women. They're not all young men and women, but most of them are, you know, that 18 to 21-year-old, and they come in and they change their lives.
Since the time you left the military and you look at the world today and look at it through the prism of someone who understood the national security challenge, where do we stand today?
Well,
because you've said here at this table a couple of years ago that you thought we needed to have more troops in Syria.
Right. So I will tell you, I applaud both President Obama and President Trump for the trajectory we're on now in terms of the fight against ISIS. So it was probably a little over a year ago, maybe March of last year, when President Obama really decided to kind of double down on our efforts in Iraq and in Syria in terms of increasing the number of troops on the ground, working with the Iraqis, working with the moderate Syrians. And I think you've seen the effect that this has had on ISIS, and certainly as President Trump has come in, he has continued that effort and I think even increased the number of troops on the ground. So I think that strategy is working as far as ISIS goes. And I'm appreciative of both presidents for their efforts against it, because this is, you know, ISIS is really a scourge not only for the Middle East and that region, but the second and third order effects of what ISIS creates when you have this mass migration into Europe, when you have the potential to pressurize the Levant area, Jordan and Lebanon and others, it is important that we take care of this problem. So again, I think we're making good progress against ISIS. I think that this the strike that we conducted in Syria, when we determined that there was another chemical attack, I applauded those efforts. I thought it was appropriate. It was proportional. My only regret is that I think we need to continue to apply pressure in Syria on the ground when we see the Syrian army beginning to threaten the moderate Syrians. And until you do that, until we begin to have the high ground, if you will, both the tactical, the strategic, and the moral high ground in Syria, I don't know that we can apply pressure on the Russians. You know, right now we don't have many cards to play. So I do think we need to come up with a strategy. When I say we, I think this is the great work that, you know, Rex Tillerson will do and Jim Mattis will do in terms of advising the president on options to apply pressure on Assad, on the Russians. We've got to be in a position to strengthen Syria, and we're not there.
Trump does seem to have a lot of respect for the military people.
He does. Yeah, and we appreciate that. You know, I think his choice of Jim Mattis as the Secretary of Defense was absolutely the right guy for the job.
What about Mattis that makes everybody say that?
Well, you know, Jim Mattis, one, intellectually very deep. He is a voracious reader. Jim was my neighbor for several years, and I worked with him for many years. We are old and dear friends. I have the greatest respect for Jim Mattis. He is, again, tactically and strategically, you know, incredibly sound in terms of understanding the battlefield and the implications of how to kind of fight wars. He's great with the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. He is kind of the general's general, if you will. He knows how to spend time with the soldiers. He knows what makes the soldiers tick. So he has the respect not only of the young, you know, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, but he has the respect of the senior officers in the military. And as the Secretary of Defense, certainly all the combatant commanders, the senior officers, we report to the Secretary of Defense.
The book is called Make Your Bed. Admiral William H. McRaven, U.S. Navy, retired. He's had a remarkable life for a young man, and it continues in the good state of Texas. Back in a moment. Stay with us.